Namaste, sir.
Namaskar ji.
So I hope you are doing well.
All well, all good, Meg.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone, including the participants and the speaker for today. And before we start the webinar today, I'd like to welcome sir on behalf of All India Institute of Valuers Foundation. So let me give you a brief introduction and then we can start with today's webinar. So for everyone, Mr. C. Ankit Goyal, he is a practicing chartered accountant and a registered valuer under the category SFP. He's a founder partner of AAA Valuation Professionals LLP, which is an RVE recognized by IBBI for all three asset classes. He's also a founder partner in AAA Insolvency Professionals LLP. He has been a speaker in various sessions conducted by AIIOBF on topics like valuation of startups and use of CLD, that is caveats, limitations, and disclaimer, which is our topic for today. He has also delivered his services as a faculty in various RBOs, including All India Institute of Valuers Foundation. And I'd like to invite him on behalf of AIIOVA for today's session. On to you, sir.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here. And this topic that we'll be discussing today is very, very dear to me. I feel that as a valuer, it is very, very important to understand the effects of caveats, limitations, and disclaimers in the reports that we are making. These CLDs, as I will call them again and again throughout this session, are extremely important to be understood because they have a very, very grave impact on the usability of the valuation report that we are giving. And this is therefore, it becomes very, very important to understand this. So before I continue, I will perhaps request participants to give me a maybe raise your hands in case you have an opinion on CLDs, and we can then keep this as an interactive session wherein I can understand that what specific doubts do you have in your mind, which I should try and answer. So I'll keep a watch on the participants list, and if there is any question, anything, any revert, then I will keep a watch on that. I'll share my presentation. So here you go. I believe everyone can see my screen. As I said, I will request everyone to try and participate in the discussion. Try and ask whatever questions you have in your mind. If you make this interactive, it will be a better learning session for me as well as you. So what are we going to discuss? We're going to primarily talk about the guidelines issued by IBBI. This was issued for caveats, limitations versus disclaimers. That is what has been talked about in this guideline primarily. Secondly, the general requirements from a valuation report are required to be understood. So there it becomes important that we understand that, okay, what is the IBBI expecting from our valuation report? They have repeated a few of the rules that are already part of the Companies Act. They have also at the same time mentioned some items from the IVS. We will discuss that at length. Guidance on use of CLDs, then comes this topic wherein they will tell us that, okay, the circular will tell us, the guidelines will tell us how CLDs should be used. Then the guidelines expressly state a list of or give a list of CLDs which are not required, not allowed to be used. We will talk about those. We will make sure then subsequently that our valuation report should not contain those CLDs. Then commonly allowed CLDs for all asset classes, and then commonly allowed CLDs for specific asset classes is what we will discuss. We'll also briefly discuss that in our capacity as insolvency professionals, as companies, how can we decrease the CLDs and the valuation reports of valuers. So the guidelines are called the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, Use of Caveats, Limitations and Disclaimers in Valuation Reports Guidelines 2020. These have come into force with effect from 1st October 2020. After all the reports that are finalized post 1st October 2020 will be all the reports that are finalized after 1st October 2020 should be compliant with this requirement. Rule 8 of the company's Registered Valuers and Valuation Rules 2017 mandates that registered valuers shall state caveats, limitations, and disclaimers to the extent they explain or elucidate the limitations faced by the valuer, which shall not be for the purpose of limiting his responsibility for the valuation report or make the valuation unsuitable for the purpose for which the valuation was conducted. So what are we saying? We are saying that the CLDs are allowed to the extent they explain or elucidate the limitations faced by the valuer. Anyone who can tell me what kind of limitations do you normally face when you are doing a valuation? Anyone who will like to speak out or maybe put it into the chat box? What kind of limitations does the valuer face in when he's making the valuation report or doing the valuation assignment? Anyone? Okay, so the idea is that the limitations faced by the valuer, they can be of many types. Somebody can say that I think I have a few reverts. Ownership verification, Tusharji is sharing that. Kamlesh ji is saying availability of records. Very well. Thank you for your input. And video option, I believe, is not available to participants. Participants in this format will have to raise their hands and I can allow them to speak. So the video is not available to participants in this format that we are using today, but I can definitely allow you to speak. But you will have to raise your hand for that. Are you able to see the raise your hand option?
Sir, we are able to see.
Can you be a little more audible, sir?
We are able to see.
Yeah, I'm able to hear you now.
Thank you.
So what I was saying was that to the extent of the limitations, availability of comparative data is another input that I have received. Yes, Kalyanji, the PPT will be shared, but I think we are in the middle of the session, so I will love that everyone participates and make this an interactive and a learning session. So, as I said, CLDs are allowed to be used by the registered valuers to the extent they explain or explain the limitations faced by the valuer. When we talk about limitations faced by the valuer, the limitations faced by the valuer can be different ones for different asset classes. For a land and building valuer, the limitation can be that the title deeds are not available for verification of the rights of the person. The premises are not available for verification from indoor, from inside. Um, the uh, the the valuer is uh, not able to estimate the cost of construction because of lack of building plans that might be available otherwise for other properties. So these are some of the issues that are some limitations that can be stated. For plant and machinery valuers, the limitations can be again very different. Plant and machinery valuers, what can be the limitations? Anyone? Anyone from P&M segment here who can share any limitations faced by them during the valuation exercise? Anyone? Okay, so the point is that plant and machinery valuers can also face too many limitations. They can have a issue without the FAR. There can be, as Kalyanji has shared, that they can have a 3-shift problem that, okay, how many shifts do we work for? Plant and machinery valuers can also have missing dates as to how old is the plant and machinery. They might have a limitation with respect to access to a running plant and machinery to check its usability. At times you come to the go to the factory and find out that there is no electricity. Now, without any electricity, how can you perform the basic tests that are required or that would be required by anyone who is buying a machinery, right? Somebody is told that, okay, this machinery, sir, a brand new machinery costs about 2 crore rupees. You can buy this one, which is second hand, but we will not be able to show you if it works. So the value will deteriorate, right? Or the value will be it will be difficult to find a customer for that kind of machine, which nobody knows whether it runs or not. So the idea is, however, that the CLDs should not be for the purpose of limiting his responsibility. They should not limit the valuer's responsibility for the valuation report or make the valuation unsuitable for the purpose for which the valuation was conducted. So say you have been appointed under IBC to do a valuation, and you say, oh, I have done the valuation, but I have not done physical verification for computing the liquidation value. In that case, your valuation report might be unsuitable, because if you're saying that you have not done physical verification, which is a basic requirement under IBC, then that is a problem, right? So I hope everyone has got this gist. I'll move forward now. So there is a there was a committee of experts that was appointed for taking up this task of coming out with the guidelines on CLDs. The committee of experts submitted its report, and then the report was considered by IBBI. Objective to guidelines, it was to provide guidance to registered valuers in the use of caveats, limitations, and disclaimers which shall not be used for a valuation report. As per the rules under 14I, the guidelines are mandatory to be complied with, and they are also having a statutory requirement under Rule 8 of the rules. So I hope this is clear to everyone that this is important. Section 59(7) of Draft Valuer Bill 2020. Now, this is produced here so that all of you can have a perspective that what is going to happen in the future. Now, Draft Valuer Bill 2020 is there. It might be tabled in the Parliament, might be passed in the near future. Point is that this bill also talks about how the CLDs should be there, how much CLDs, to what extent CLDs can be used, and it also says that the valuation report shall be good enough or shouldn't have too many disclaimers, such that it is admissible as expert evidence within the meaning of section 45 of the Evidence Act. So that is the idea. Now, Committee of Experts has also talked about how the disclaimers dilute the responsibility of the evaluators and how that should not be something that is allowed or permitted. Structure and sections of guidelines. So three sections: need for caveats, limitations, and disclaimers in evaluation report. Then guidance note on the use of caveats, limitations, and disclaimers. Illustrative list of caveats, limitations, and disclaimers for each asset class provided in the rules. And these three sections are required to be understood by us to understand the whole topic. Coming to the need for caveats, limitations, and disclaimers. So 8.3, Rule 8.3L, as we have already discussed, provides for the provision of CLDs. We will not repeat that. A limitation arises if the RV is unable to obtain sufficient information and explanations considered necessary for the purpose of valuation. So that is when a limitation comes into being. Now, where such limitation results in the RV being unable to carry out the valuation in accordance with the normal approach to valuation, the valuation report shall be modified with a paragraph setting out the nature of circumstances giving rise to the limitation. A disclaimer is required in a valuation report to mitigate the potential risk of the registered valuer. The reasons for providing disclaimers in a valuation report are as under. They can be that it protects the rights of a registered valuer by cautioning and dissuading others when using the contents. A disclaimer limits the liability of a registered valuer since it serves both as a warning and a way to mitigate risks. A disclaimer protects the RV from liability. So anyone who reads the disclaimer should understand the risk involved in using the valuation report or acting upon the information that it contains. A disclaimer protects the RV from incurring liability or limits the liability of the RV from the actions of the company or management or insolvency professional at whose instruction the valuation has been carried out. So is this need clear to everyone, or is anyone having any questions on this requirement, that why are CLDs required? Why is a disclaimer required? Objective of issuing a disclaimer by the valuers. The valuation report should not carry a disclaimer which has potential to dilute the responsibility of the RV or makes the valuation unsuitable for the purpose for which the valuation was conducted. The valuation report should be capable of being tested through the crucible of legal evidence and judicial proceedings. So the following may be considered while providing disclaimers in a valuation report. An RV may identify the rights he wants to protect, identify the areas where he/she might be subject to liability, clarify that the contents of the valuation report pertain to specific use by the company, and caution the reader of the potential risks. However, a disclaimer will not by itself be able to exclude an RV's liability in respect of negligence in performance of his duties. When can we say that the RV might have been negligent in performing his duties? Any circumstances that any of you can share where you feel that the RV might be considered to be negligent in the performance of his duties? Anyone? Not doing site visit or measurement is one revert. Acts of omission is another revert from Mr. Narayan. So negligence in performing the duties can have a very, very wide meaning also. Negligence in performing his duties can also be that the registered valuer has not conducted a process that he was supposed to conduct. based on the mandate given to him. It can also mean that the registered valuer, of course, omitted to do something, or he did not do a site visit or measurement wherever it was required as per the scope of work. So yes, that is also the case. The idea is that RV's liability in respect of negligence is that the registered value, the valuation report should be very, very clear on how the registered valuer has processed or come to the conclusion that he has in the valuation report. And if that is not there, if there are silly calculation mistake, if there is lack of any reasoning behind the valuation report, then yes, we can say that maybe the RV is negligent. So detailed and fully reasoned valuation report should be prepared in every case of valuation done in respect of both mandatory and discretionary valuation where an RV is appointed. The following aspects need to be considered during the preparation of a valuation report: contents of a valuation report, procedures involved in preparation of valuation report, caveats, limitations, and disclaimers. Now, what are the contents of a valuation report? Now, considering the interest of stakeholders and the need for transparency, the undernoted matters should be compulsorily covered in the valuation report. That is background information of the asset being valued, purpose of valuation and appointing authority, basis of value, that is IVS. Under IVS, basis of value is a requirement. Everyone understands the meaning of basis of value? Can everyone differentiate between basis of value, then the valuation premise, then the valuation approach, and the valuation method? I hope everyone can differentiate between these four because these are all different concepts. So premise of value is the next step. Then identity of the RV and any other experts involved in the valuation. Intended users of the valuation. Disclosure of RV interest or conflict, if any. Date of appointment, valuation date, and date of report. Now, all these are important and they are all required to be mentioned in the valuation report in a clear, unambiguous, and a misleading and a non-misleading manner, consistent with the need to maintain confidentiality. Inspection and or investigations undertaken. Now, this is the next step. You have to talk about investigations and inspections that have been undertaken during the valuation exercise. Then to talk about business interest, ownership characteristics in IVS, nature and sources of information, significant assumptions, if any, procedures adopted in carrying out the valuation and valuation standards followed, restrictions on use of report, if any, major factors that were taken into account during valuation, conclusion, and caveats, limitations, and disclaimers. So what are the procedures involved in preparation of valuation report? The procedures involved in carrying out a valuation may vary with circumstances, nature, and purpose of valuation, as well as information and time available. The principal procedures adopted by the RV in carrying out the valuation should be set out briefly in the report. Such procedures may typically include review of past financials, review and analysis of financial projections, industry analysis, SWOT analysis, that is to identify your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, comparison with similar transactions, and comparison with other similar listed companies. So is it clear that these principal procedures are required in an evaluation report? You cannot escape these principal procedures. Now they are also mentioned in the guidelines other than the IVS or other documents wherein the standards are finalized. Procedures that are involved in preparation of the valuation report also include discussions with the management, review of principal agreements, documents, etc., site visit, external, internal, or both, or desktop valuation. Any assumption made for internal condition must be stated like in the case of desktop valuation. An RV must state that the basis of the report is photographs and documents provided and secondary research only. And the process of site identification, in other words, self-identified or with the help of client's representative or client itself, should also be done. The RV should also include in his report an affirmative statement that information provided and assumptions used by management, others in developing projections have been appropriately reviewed, inquiries made regarding basis of current assumptions in context of business being valued in the industry economy. RV should also include in his report affirmative statement on adequacy of information and time for carrying out the valuation. So can I say that if that the valuer cannot take the argument or cannot bring the argument that the information was not adequate or that the time was not adequate to do the valuation report properly? So in my opinion, no, that is not possible. It is very, very important to say that the information and time to carry out required to carry out the valuation was adequate. You have to give an affirmative statement. You have to confirm that yes, it was okay, everything was in place. Clear? The RV should mention any key factors which have a material impact on the valuation, including the size or number of the assets or shares of the company, their materiality or significance, minority or majority holding, and changes on account of transaction, any impacts on controlling interest, diminution or augmentation therein, and marketability or lack thereof. The prevailing market conditions and government policy in specified industry as a disclaimer, depending upon the factors. So the idea is the prevailing market conditions and government policy, as well as the size or number of assets, all of these are important for the purpose of mentioning as a key factor in which material impact on the valuation is understood. Adequacy of information and time can be a matter of CLD, but what is normally done, sir, Mr. Badri, is that when there is inadequate information, one writes that okay, this is the information that was not available, and then one writes that yes, we have taken the following assumptions or we have relied on other evidence that was available with us in the absence of that information. With respect to time, saying that the time provided to us to do this valuation was not good enough generally is something that is opposed. So basically, making that kind of a statement will be difficult to be carried forward, to be appreciated. Where I say, no, I did not have enough time to do my job, right? So normally when you're doing the job, when you're doing a valuation report, you have to take care of that. So in case of valuation of tangible assets, there may be impact on the value due to faulty structural design or contamination. And based on the individual circumstances, the RV may decide on how to use such information in the valuation report. So you can always have a look at tangible assets valuation and then make sure that the changes in the changes in the tangible asset valuation should also be accounted for, brought forward, and so on. So the caveats are warnings or cautions to the client, user of services. Limitation is a restriction on the scope and the RV's work, including inspection or investigation of the data available for analysis that may be present and known to the RV. A disclaimer is a statement intended to specify or delimit the scope of rights and obligations that may be exercised and enforced by parties in a legally recognized relationship. It is a statement denying responsibility intended to prevail civil liability arising for the particular acts or omissions. So I hope it is clear to everyone that what is a caveat, what is a disclaimer. Mostly the idea is that a disclaimer is more of a statement which delimits the scope of rights, or rather says that, okay, please don't come and claim this against me. I am giving a disclaimer. I am already giving you a information prior to you coming me and telling me that there's a issue, there's a problem. Caveats, on the other hand, are warnings or cautions to the client or user of services. So what are warnings or cautions? I can give a caveat. I can shout out loud and say, "Oh, I'm telling everyone that I am warning you that in case you do this, then you will end up having a loss. Or if you don't give me this information, then I'm not confident that yes, this is what is going to be the future, or that I have based my projections based on the future incomes, and that if these don't come in the future, then I can give a caveat. So caveat is more like saying कि अगर कुछ हो गया तो please don't trouble me. अगर कुछ खराब हो गया तो please don't trouble me. I had given you a warning at that time when I was giving you the report. A disclaimer is more of a statement where I'm saying that I'm limiting my scope of work or my obligation. Then I'm saying, no, I was never responsible for this, therefore this is not my job, right? So that kind of a disclaimer. So caveats, limitations, and disclaimers have different connotation, but they can be used in an interchangeable manner, as limitation or a disclaimer by an RV would also be caveat for the user of the report. So it is very, very important for all of us to understand that what is limitation or disclaimer for me as a valuer might be a caveat for the person who is reading the report, right? So we need to therefore say that it is imperative that the users of reports are familiarized about the same to enable them to assess the impact of the disclaimers. Can anyone share any negative impact of any disclaimer or CLD which you have encountered in your career? Anyone? Any negative impact that you have seen? Any negative impact of the CLDs that you have experienced or that you think might be possible? So the most important one is that when there are too many CLDs, the court frequently says that with so many assumptions, with so many conditions, it is difficult for us to come to a conclusion that uh, the with so many with so many caveats, limitations, or disclaimers, the bankers or the users of the valuation reports, they start feeling that with so many riders, it will be difficult to prove this report or use this report in case of any legal proceedings, in case of any court, in case somebody wants it. So in case somebody writes, oh, I was not given the title deeds, I've still done the valuation, these are my assumptions. Now, do you think that that report will be as strong as a report which says, oh, I verified the title deed, they're perfectly okay, I have seen the legal rights in the land and building, and they seem to be okay to me? So in that case, yes, there will be more confidence in the valuation report, right? Rather than saying, no, this was not available when we checked. So the RV does not make or calibrate the projections, but factors the response and the valuation assessment on the reliability and credibility of the information. So the RV is not making projections or calibrating them. He's more so, he's using the factors he's simply factors his response. He kind of says that, okay, I will just put all these in perspective and then take that forward. And the RV should consider the reliability and credibility of projections after testing the assumptions, right? So that is important. Sufficient inspection, inquiry, computation, analysis. Now, this is a word that you will find everywhere. Sufficient inspection, inquiry, computation, analysis, and you will find this many times in IVS. So these are the stages that you should cover. It can be inspection, inquiry, computation, analysis, and you should ideally complete this in that sense. The RV may disagree with the projections if they are conjectural or bordering on the unreal and ordinarily make necessary modifications. Clear? Anyone has any queries so far? Please tell me. Any query whatsoever? So the RV may disagree with the projections. I hope, I think many of you must be registered valuers, and there I will registered valuers for SFA. And I would like to share that if the RV disagrees with the projections, and if they're conjectural or bordering on the unreal, then the necessary modifications can be made by the RV. So I think Weberji is putting a question, putting a remark that CLDs seem to be more useful if making a big valuation. So CLDs are, as stated in this guideline, is useful for all valuations in my opinion, because in smaller valuations, there might be a requirement for you to discharge your liability of collecting information, or talk about the documents that you wanted which are not available. In larger valuations, yes, there are more complexity. There is also more documents that might be required, more projections. But believe me, CLDs are not limited to one asset class. They're not limited to securities or financial assets. They are applicable to everyone. So that ways you will find that, yes, they are useful everywhere. So the RV has the right to demand relevant information on the basis of projections before commenting thereon. And it is the duty of the entity being valued to be fair and to provide accurate information about the subject asset, right? So RV has the right, I think everyone understands that RV can demand that, okay, what is the information and basis of the projections that you have given me? Tell me. So normally, you have the Excel projections given to you. In a valuation report, the RV can state that the assumptions are statements of facts provided by the company and not generated by the registered valuer. This warning statement is necessary as data provided by the company is often construed to be part of a valuation report. Notwithstanding this, the RV has to carry out sufficient inspection, inquiry, computation, analysis. Right? Same thing you will find again: inspection, inquiry, computations, and analysis to ensure that the valuation is properly supported. Clear? So basically, the idea is that one, we talked about the right to demand relevant information. Then we said that it is the duty of the entity to provide relevant, accurate information. Then we said that the RV can state the assumptions or statements of facts provided by the company and not generated by the RV. This warning statement is necessary as data provided by the company is often considered to be part of the valuation report, right? So data provided by the company, I agree that several times it happens that the company gives you some data and you make it part of the valuation report. So your judgment or your notings on the valuation kind of merge with the data that is available to you from the company, right? And of course, the RV has to carry out sufficient inspection, inquiry, and all that, and ensure that the data is evaluation is properly supported based on that data. Now, the valuations are to be carried out in sufficient detail and comply with the requirement of due care. So, when do you think that the sufficient detail protocol is completed? Can you give me one or two circumstances when sufficient detail to comply with the requirements of due care are completed? Anyone? Anyone? What is the sufficient detail? Please feel free to use the chat box, or if you want to speak out, you can raise your hand. I think Pareshji has raised his hand. Paresh, you can unmute yourself now. You're saying something, Pareshji? Pareshji, I think we are able to hear you. Can you speak up? I think there's an issue at your end which is not allowing you to speak. No, sir, we're not able to hear you. Anyone else? Okay. So the idea is try and participate as much as possible, even in case you don't have an answer. It will be extremely helpful in case you can participate. So the idea is that the valuations are to be carried out in sufficient detail and with due care, keeping in view business needs and circumstances, and in the interest of transparency, any significant concerns regarding the justification, the information, or the time available to complete the valuation be stated in the valuation report together with the appropriate explanation and implications. The effort, diligence, and level of expertise applied by the relevant registered valuer need to be stated in the valuation report. Clear to everyone? Any questions? No. Okay. So what are the illustrative CLDs which are not to be used? Now, this is a barred list. Now, these are the CLDs that you are not allowed to use at all. And it includes historical analysis. So what is this CLD on the historical analysis that you can't use? Of course, you have to use historical analysis. That's one of the best ways to have a basis of the numbers that you're predicting or the numbers that you're projecting. So the RV is giving disclaimer that he has not done any historical analysis while conducting valuation exercise is a CLD which one cannot use. So the RV cannot say that he has not done the historical analysis, and where the historical analysis is not applicable, past data is not available, past data or the company is newly incorporated, all that is there, or all that will remain. But the idea is very clear that historical analysis has to be done, where it can be arranged with reasonable effort. Hope this is clear to everyone. One approach, are we giving valuation conclusion based on only one approach without giving any reason as to why the other two approaches were not considered in his valuation? So you have to talk about the three approaches. What are the three approaches? Anyone who can tell me on the chat box? What are the three valuation approaches? Anyone? Very well, sir. Cost, income, and market, Mr. Badri has shared. What are the economic principles behind, or what is the economic principle behind cost approach? What is the economic principle behind income approach, and what is the economic principle behind market approach? So there is a minor difference in IVS. When we talk about IVS, we talk about approaches and we talk about methods. So replacement cost method is more of a method which is part of cost approach. So Weberji is saying market is substitution. Okay. What is the economic principle for income and cost approaches, or any other answers? Anyone who says that what are the other economic principles that we follow when we talk about other approaches? Anyone? Vaibhavji has said market is substitution. Any other inputs from anyone? This is very basic, like, we're talking about a very, very basic concept because we're doing valuation every day, perhaps. So we must be looking at different approaches and looking at different economic concepts. I've got another answer that income is rent capitalization. We're looking at what approaches have what economic principle behind them. Okay, what are the three economic principles that we talk about when we talk about valuation? Substitution is one. What is the other one? Can I say the other one is anticipation of benefits? And the third one is price equilibrium. These are the three economic principles that have been mentioned in IVS also, right? So which one amongst the three seems to be market approach? Substitution, price equilibrium, and anticipation of benefits. Price equilibrium is what? Price equilibrium is market, right? What is income? What is income approach? Which economic principle is income approach? What economic principle is income approach? Anticipation of benefits, right? And what about cost approach? What economic principle is behind cost approach? Substitution. So I believe yes. So you have all understood that market approach uses the economic principle of price equilibrium, because when you look at the market, you see something, you feel that, oh, if this is priced at this value in the market, and my asset is very similar to what is being priced here, then my asset must be very similar in value. The moment you look at income, you see anticipation of benefits, and there again you say, oh, this is what I'm going to get in future. I'm expecting future cash flows, future income, and due to that, I'm giving a value. Thirdly, you can look at substitution. You say, oh, I have a building which is constructed on this land parcel. I will pay for this building over and above this piece of land only if this building is coming to me at a specific value, which is my own substitution cost, right? So all this is important. Hope you understood this concept. So one approach should not be used, or we should use different approaches wherever possible. Then the next thing comes is RV is giving disclaimer of for work by any other expert, and the findings of the same does not form part of the report of the RV. So what are we talking about? Any idea? When can we appoint another expert as the valuer or as the person who will be advising us in our valuation report? What circumstances can we appoint somebody else as an expert? Anyone? Anyone? So whenever we don't have any expertise, right? So we might be a plant and machinery valuer, and say maybe we are doing a valuation which is for a industry which we are not aware of, which we have no confidence in. So in that case, we will be able to then take that forward in that manner. Another possibility is that we can have a system where we say that, oh, we want to do another we want to do a valuation for the shares of the company, and in the company there is some immovable properties. In that case, then you kind of try to find value for the immovable property and then take that forward, right? So restrictions on the use of valuation report. Now this document has been prepared for the purposes stated herein and should not be relied upon. So basically, now we're talking about an illustrative CLD. These are the CLDs. I think we've talked about. This illustrative list, that is historical analysis, one approach, another expert. Some other illustrative CLDs which are not required to be used or which are not allowed to be used are disclaimers for the business plan, forecast, receipt from the client without applying test of reasonability. So even if you're getting the business plan from the client, you have to put a check on the reasonability of that data and make sure that that normal due diligence is done on that data before using it. Then there has to be a physical verification, and the RV giving a disclaimer that he has not physically verified the tangible assets in case where engagement is for providing liquidation value. There also physical verification is important. Market related data, RV giving disclaimers for the market related data employed in his reports, example beta, discounting factor, comparable companies, comparable transactions, valuation matrices without testing appropriateness of the same. All these are important market related data. Historical analysis. Now, are we giving disclaimer that he has not done any historical analysis while conducting valuation exercises of listed, unlisted entities, although the historical data could have been arranged with reasonable effort? So here also, in historical analysis, we had already discussed this, that this is important. So market-related data, physical verification, business plan forecast received from the client, all these are CLDs which we need to be careful about. There is a specific provision in the guidelines that says that we should not be using these. We should be rather working on these, and the report should not simply give these disclaimers on these items. Illustrative CLDs for all asset classes. So in this case, there is the first one is restriction on use of valuation report. So what one can say is that yes, this document has been prepared for the purpose stated therein, and it should not be relied upon for other purpose. Our client is the only authorized user of this report and is restricted for the purpose indicated in the engagement letter. So this restriction does not preclude the client from providing a copy of the report to third-party advisors whose review could be consistent with the intended use. So IV do not take any responsibility for the unauthorized use of this report. So you can limit the use. Anyone who can tell me any advantages of limiting the use of the report? Anyone? You can also speak out in case you want to. I can unmute anyone who wants to speak out. Anyone? Pareshi? Sorry. Yeah, this I think Bhagya Lakshmi ji. Yes, Bhagya Lakshmi ji. Anyone who wants to share any input?
This is Vaibhav. Good afternoon, sir. This is Vaibhav Gupta.
Yes, Vaibhav ji.
Yeah, am I able to? You are able to hear me?
I can hear you, sir.
Yeah, matlab, I think it might so happen that what assumptions I am making. So the report, the third party is reviewing the report. He is not assuming those same assumptions. So because of which there might be some contradictions.
All right. So there might be some contradictions in the sense that you're saying that you are making some assumptions which may not be which may not be meeting the purpose that is required by the other person. You're saying this?
Yeah.
So can I say that, and can I conclude that it is it is important to limit the use of the evaluation report to avoid a possible use wherein the assumptions may not be suitable for the set purpose, and if there the purpose has been some other purpose based on which I have given the report.
Right, sir. Right, sir.
Very well said. So any other input from anyone else? So I'll request all of you, I have given the rights to unmute yourself and mute yourself. So maybe you can mute yourself once you have talked and then mute yourself. This way we will all be able to interact openly. So the restrictions on the use of the valuation report is basically important because say I have done a valuation for a company for the limited purpose of their internal use, and they use my report for the purpose of getting a bank loan, and I have never issued the valuation report for the purpose of a bank loan or for the bank to use it as a measure of the value of the property, because then the added responsibility from the bank might come on me. So all that is important, that what is the restriction on use of the valuation report, and the use of the valuation report might also change the valuation basis. Then the responsibility of the RV. So we can say the RV can say we owe responsibility to only to the authority or the client that has appointed me or us under the terms of the engagement letters. So basically you can say that I am not responsible to the financial loss for anyone else. I have been appointed for a specific purpose. So my responsibility is limited to the person appointing me or to the regulator who is or based on the statute that is applicable on that report, right? So in case I've done a valuation under FEMA, the rules of FEMA will apply to me with respect to, how much, if there is any problem, if there is any issue, right? So therefore, similarly, there might be other statutes, other things that are required to be looked into to understand the responsibility of the registered valuer, and that responsibility is therefore important to be understood from the engagement letters. That is what the report should be limited to. Accuracy of information. So while our work has involved an analysis of financial information and accounting records, our engagement does not include an audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards of the client's existing business records. So accordingly, we express no audit opinion. So you have to say that no, we have used the financial information, we have used data from the accounting records, but our engagement does not include an audit. What is the audit? Audit is we have not looked into vouchers, we have not looked into genuineness, we have not seen the internal control systems of the organization. We have relied on some financial information, maybe projections, maybe we relied upon the balance sheet and so on, but we have not gone deep enough to do an audit, right? That is what you can give as a disclaimer. Achievability of the forecast results. So we say that we do not provide assurance on the achievability of the results forecast by the management owners, as events and circumstances do not occur as expected. Differences between actual and expected results may be material. So we express no opinion as to how closely the actual results will correspond to those projected forecast, as the achievement of forecast results is dependent on actions, plans, and assumptions of the management. Is this clear as well? Achievability of the forecast results. So wherever I'm making some projections, wherever I'm doing an income valuation, I'm projecting the future anticipated benefits to me. I have to make sure that those benefits are. I have to kind of say that those are forecasts, and I am not giving a guarantee that yes, those forecasts will always come true. And if they don't come true, then I am not supposed to be held liable for the same. Clear? Post valuation date events. So this should be disclosed while defining valuation date. The user to which this valuation is addressed should read the basis upon which the valuation has been done and be aware of the potential for later variation in value due to factors that are unforeseen at the valuation date. So you have to say that post valuation date events are not taken into account. They are not. They should be disclosed on the valuation date, or they should be disclosed while defining the valuation date. And these post valuation event dates may impact the value, but you are saying that the user of the valuation should take into account the changes that have happened post the valuation date, and that is how the report should be read. Range of value estimate. So the valuation of companies and assets is made based on the available facts and circumstances, and the conclusions arrived at in many cases will be subjective and dependent on the exercise of individual judgment. So although every scientific method has been employed and systematically arrived at the value, there is no indisputable single value. So basically what happens, the idea is that in many cases, the valuer says, how can I give a specific value to the asset? I will like to give a range. So he says, oh, this value, this should be, between 10,000 rupees to 12,000 rupees. So, we do that every day. Whenever somebody asks us, oh, what do you think should be the price of this? So you give a range, right? So therefore, it is important for us to understand that when range of value is not allowed to be given as per statute, then I can always say that, oh, the valuation is made based on range of value estimate. But then, yes, because there has to be a single value, then we have averaged it and so on. No responsibility to the actual price of the subject asset if sold or transferred or exchanged. So the actual market price achieved may be higher or lower than our estimate of value or range of value depending upon the circumstances of the transaction. So for example, the competitive bidding environment, the nature of the business, the knowledge, negotiating ability, and motivation of the buyers and sellers, and the applicability of a discount or premium for control will also affect actual market price achieved. So accordingly, our valuation conclusion will not necessarily be the price at which actual transaction will take place. So hope this is also clear that we are not taking any responsibility as valuers that when we are giving a X value to an item or a asset, when we should not take the responsibility that that is what is going to be the value at which the transaction will happen. You never know the changes in market forces, how things will change overnight, and how those values will no longer be feasible. So that's something that we need to take into account. Reliance on the representation of owners, clients, the management, and other third parties. So, what is the valuation process? Whenever you do a valuation, you will look at the client, the owner, and its management representatives, how they have warranted to us that the information they supplied was complete, accurate, and true and correct to the best of their knowledge. So we have to say that yes, the management has given us all this information. We have relied upon it, and because we have not done an audit, because we were not required to do an audit, we have not we are not confirming that we have done that. And yes, based on our assessment, we have verified the data, we have done basic checks, and yes, the reliance on the representation of the owner clients and their management and third parties, and therefore taken. Then, no procedure performed to corroborate information taken from reliable external sources. So, we have relied upon the data from external sources, also to include the valuation. These sources are believed to be reliable, and therefore we assume no liability for the truth or accuracy of any data, opinion, or estimates furnished by others that have been used in the analysis. So there we may have relied on data, opinions, or estimates from external sources. Reasonable care has been taken to ensure that such data has been correctly extracted, and so on. So basically, we are saying that we have not performed any procedure to corroborate information taken from reliable external sources. So what are these reliable external sources? Anyone who can tell me what are external sources that we're talking about here? What are the external sources that you're talking about here? Anyone? What are the external sources that you're talking about here? So the external sources we're talking about here are sources that we normally use. So say we want to take out the discount rate, then we use an online portal or some online database or some, NSE, BSE data. So all these data is coming in from, through maybe some intermediaries, some external sources. Whenever we go for a land and building valuation, we try to find out the market prices in the vicinity of the area. That is again an external source. So you have to make sure that this external source is something that has been taken care of, that this external source is we need to talk about how this external source was not corroborated, and if yes, if that is corroborated with something else, then we need to state that also. Clear? So compliance with relevant laws. The report assumes that the company, business, assets complies fully with the relevant laws and regulations applicable to its area of operation and usage unless otherwise stated, right? So we are very, very clear that the compliance with relevant laws is important because is saying that whenever the report assumes that the company, business, asset complies fully with the relevant laws and regulations applicable to its area of operations, and how the laws are being we assuming that the laws are being adhered to, the laws are being complied with, and that is how we then say that this report has given no consideration to the matter of a legal nature. So we say that we have not looked into the legal records, we have not done a legal due diligence, we have done a valuation, right? Because that's what we are here for, that we are doing a valuation. So we can say that we have not checked thoroughly the compliance with relevant laws. And yes, based on the representation that was done or given to us, we have seen and understood how the issues or of legal title, compliance with local laws and other have been complied with, or how they have been how if they have been hidden from the financial statements, then they may not be available to us for verification. Multiple factors affecting valuation reports. What are these multiple factors? The valuation report is tempered by the exercise of judicious discretion by the RV, taking into account the relevant factors. So there will always be several factors, example, management capability, present and prospective competition, yield on comparable securities, market sentiment, etc., which may not be apparent from the balance sheet, but could strongly influence the value. So these are again some CLDs which can be used. One CLD which can be used. So future services, including but not limited to testimony or attendance in courts. So you have done a valuation, you have given a report. Now, what do you do about any legal issue? So in case tomorrow the court wants you to come and explain your valuation report, then you can give this disclaimer or the CLD and say that, oh, if the court asks me, that is not part of my scope of work. At that point in time, the expenses will be managed in this manner, so that everything is clear that way. Clear? Unavailability of information as on valuation date. So the liquidation value and fair value of the assets of the company have been performed on the provisional audited standalone balance sheet. So in several circumstances, you may not have the information as on the valuation date, the financial information, the balance sheet. In those cases, this kind of a CLD is warranted, so that you can say that I have relied upon some past financial statements and I don't have the latest financial statements. So in case there is a change in the status, change in the value, change in the assets, change in the liabilities that is not recorded here, then please excuse me. Please excuse me for the same, because I don't have information. If I don't have the latest financial statements, how can I guarantee that yes, this is the amount that is there that is required to be taken into consideration? Some illustrative CLDs specific to tangible assets. What do we mean by tangible assets? Tangible assets will frequently include plant and machinery, land and building, inventories. Clear? I think everyone understands tangible assets. So what is the expectation from valuers with respect to title deeds of properties? Are we supposed to see the original title deeds when we do a land and building valuation? Most probably no, right? So because we are not required to do a title deed verification, original title deed verification, or we are not required to go and check with the registrar's office on the verification of the title deeds, we can say that it is beyond the agreed scope of our services stated in our engagement letter. Is this clear? Legal and other issues. So what can be? So we can say our valuation is primarily from a business perspective and has not considered various legal and other corporate structures beyond the limited information made available. The scope of work has been limited both in terms of areas of business and operations which have been reviewed. There may be matters other than those noted in this report which might be relevant in the context of transaction and which a wider scope might uncover. Clear? Then sketch plans and photographs. So the RV has endeavored to visually identify the land boundaries and dimensions. However, he is not a surveyor, so he has even if he has made some rough sketches, those sketches should not be understood to be sketches made by a licensed surveyor or a drawing made by an architect, which can be trusted blindly. So if we have given some indicative values, then please make sure that you verify them independently before relying on them completely. We have only done a basic due diligence that we had to do to identify the land and the boundaries, and and that we are not a surveyor to make sure that the land is accurate, or that the land size is pinpoint accurate. Latent defects affecting valuation. Now, this one talks about how physical condition in most instances have been determined by observation or indication by others. Any unknown conditions existing at the time of inspection could alter the value. No responsibility is assumed or latent defects of any nature whatsoever which may affect value, or for any expertise required to disclose such conditions. So these are all physical conditions which in most instances have been determined by observation or indication by others. And yes, any unknown conditions existing at the time of inspection could alter the value. Registered valuers' observations are not a warranty. So we have examined the assets described herein exclusively for the purpose of identification and description of the property. The RV's observations and reporting of the subject improvements are for the valuation process and purposes only, and should not be considered as a warranty of any component of the property. This valuation assumes, unless otherwise specifically stated, that the subject is structurally sound and all components are in working condition. So RV's observations are not a warranty. So everyone understands this. What is a warranty? When you buy something, some kitchen equipment, some equipment from your house, what is the warranty? Warranty is that yes, if something goes wrong, then we will compensate you, right? So we are saying that our observations, our remarks are not warranties. So in case something is not accurate based on our understanding, then please we are not giving any warranty that we have stated that yes, the building structure looks fine. So tomorrow it should not be that you're after us and say that, oh, the building structure you said is fine, so we understood that it is fine. Now you compensate us because the building has fallen down, right? So you can't have that kind of a system. Clear? Then hazardous conditions are material. Now, in the absence of statement to the contrary, we have assumed that no hazardous condition or materials exist which could affect the subject business or the asset. Now, what is hazardous condition of material? Anyone who can tell me? What is hazardous condition that we're talking about? Anyone? Hazardous condition can be where something is breaking down, something, there is a chemical hazardous material use, something that is going to poison the environment or poison the area, cause health issues to the people who are there, right? And so on. So that's there. Whenever there's a hazardous condition or material, what happens is that the cost of disposal increases, because then you have to take into factor that there are certain things that will require more effort or more caution and more care to be removed, to be disposed. So in that case, that is what we're talking about: some hazardous chemicals, some hazardous things like that, or all that. Accuracy of architectural plans. What is accuracy of architectural plans? So we are saying that where a sketch plan is attached to the report, it does not purport to represent accurate architectural plans. Sketch plans and photographs are provided as general illustrations only, right? So the accuracy of architectural plans is important to be understood. Validity of permits and licenses. So the RV can say that unless otherwise stated as part of the terms of engagement, the RV has not made a specific compliance survey or analysis of the various permits and licenses under central, state, and local laws. So, permits and licenses can run into sometimes hundreds, right? Typically, a restaurant which somebody opens can have a requirement to have up to 50, 60 licenses. Now, if somebody says, oh, I'm valuing this business, but I'm not sure if all the permits and licenses are taken for them to do this business. So in that case, you can say, oh, I had no role in identifying whether permits and licenses were there. I assumed that permits and licenses are there. I did not go through the entire 50 or 60 licenses that they were supposed to take. Continuation of subject business. So we have assumed that the business continues normally without any disruption due to statutory or other external internal occurrences, right? So this is how continuation of subject business is taken care of, where you say that, okay, we have assumed that the business will continue and there is no disruption. So what can be the disruption? COVID is a major disruption, right? Many restaurants are shut due to lockdowns enforced by under the Disaster Management Act by the government, right? So all of you must be aware of that. So in a normal course, an evaluation report, maybe you will state this, and that will safeguard you. If somebody says that, oh, I suffered loss, COVID happened, and the subject business could not continue. Independent third party. So we have acted as an independent third party, and as such shall not be considered an advocate for any concerned party for any dispute. The valuation has been carried out independently to assess the valuation services. So when we say we are an independent third party, we have to make sure that we also honor the words that we are saying. So we are saying that we have no future interest, we are independent, we have no pecuniary interest, we are not relatives of this any one person. So we are saying that our valuation is not investment advice. Our valuation should be understood to be just an independent opinion from a professional on the valuation that this land, building, or this tangible asset might provide. Valuation assumptions made by us. So we have made certain assumptions in relation to facts, conditions, or situations affecting the subject of or approach to this exercise. And we can say that, yes, we have made some assumptions. Now, these assumptions are understood or taken assumption as to be true. And we have all the reasons to continue and to say that, yes, these are true. But if any of these assumptions prove to be incorrect, then our estimate on value will need to be reviewed. So this is what we kind of say. I think we have some hands raised. No, must be a mistake. Okay, so everyone understands valuation assumptions made by us. Moving forward. Now coming to some examples which are specific for valuation of land and building. For land and building specifically, we're talking about site survey. So we say that RVs are generally not qualified as surveyors. The RV is often expected to state that the improvements on a property are located within the boundaries of the site. So generally the RV is not qualified to make that certification unless he's also qualified and registered as a surveyor. So this is one example of a CLD, and this can be stated in the valuation report. These days, a lot of technology is available for even valuers to do a check on the land area. And I believe that is something that must be done and expected out of the valuers these days. But the point is that, yes, you can always have this disclaimer and say that, yes, the land was verified through this medium. Survey qualifications. If an RV was not provided a land survey report, the RV may state that the valuation is made on the basis that there are no encroachments by or upon the property, and that this would be confirmed by a current survey report. Or this should be confirmed by a current survey report. So wherever you have a survey qualification, you can say, I have not done a survey. I did not have a recent survey. I've assumed that the land area that they have given to me is correct, and I've valued the land based on that. But yes, you can always get a survey done and make sure that this land area is equal to whatever has been stated or whatever has been stated in the papers. Town planning, resource management. So in most circumstances, the valuer will not make verbal inquiries, will only make verbal inquiries of the local authority or the state planning department as to the zoning or planning area of a property. So in some locations, it is not possible to obtain a zoning or planning area certificate, and moreover, this certificate also does cost money to get. So the point is that yes, at all cases, you may not have this, and that is something that is again an example that how you can state the CLD and say that we only made verbal checks or verbal inquiries, or we made checks through this alternative mechanism, and that is how we complete the process. Extension and nature of inquiries. So it is necessary to set out the extent and nature of the inquiries made in ascertaining the zoning and development requirements of the subject property. So, for example, town planning information was verbally obtained from the offices of town planning department. However, we recommend that this zoning or planning area should be verified by application to an appropriate authority for the issue of zoning certificate. So the extent and nature of inquiries in this case, it is necessary to set out the extent and nature of the inquiries made in understanding the zoning and development regulations. So this is also a land and building related CLD. Tenancy details. So we say that we talk about tenancy, we say we have kind of investigation of lease details. So we say that in reporting the specific lease details of a property, it is important to advise the extent of investigation or lease documents and other supporting documents undertaken by the RB. So when the lease negotiations or preparation of documentation may not have been concluded, it is necessary to specify in the report that the valuation is subject to satisfactory conclusion of those lease negotiations and taking on record of a stamped lease agreement by the parties. So for example, this assessment of market value is based on assumption that the proposed lease agreements outlined earlier in this report are all executed, signed, and stamped. Upon being stamped, those documents should be referred to the RV to confirm that the particulars of the document concur with those set out in this report. So this is again a tenancy related matter. Environmental contamination issues. So an increased awareness of environmental issues in the community today has brought about a need for valuation report to take cognizance of environmental issues that may affect the value of a particular property. So there can be contamination, there can be possibility of flooding, there can be conservation requirements from the government, there can be title claims, there can be examples which are provided in the report, which can include environmental issues, asbestos, pest infestation. All these need to be taken care of when we are valuing the land and building. Extent of investigation in respect of structural integrity. So we have to say that the extent of RV's investigation was to as to the structural integrity of the building and its plant and equipment. So an inspection of all readily accessible parts was done. The RV did not have access to qualified engineer's structural survey. He was unable to certify as to the structural soundness of the property. Then we can say we do not have access to structural report of the property nor have we inspected unexposed or inaccessible portions of the premises. But in case you see the premises otherwise, you will look for cracks, you will see, so the structure is in a very dilapidated condition, then you will kind of mark that in the valuation report. Valuation of under construction property. So this requires a valuation of assumptions in valuing under construction property to assess the market value. For security purposes, the RV should also take into consideration the market value when the construction is complete. Such a process requires a variety of assumptions to be made, which may include construction and development costs, impact of existing and future competition, the level of sale prices. In the case of income properties, the likely levels of rents, the lease up period, rental concessions and commissions, capitalization rates, discount rates, etc. So set out in basically it is therefore you can say that set out in detail of assumption made and qualifying clauses One can say it is therefore imperative that the RV undertakes valuation of an under construction property, sets out details of assumptions made, and asserts qualifying clause in valuation report stating that the valuation is subject to the assumptions outlined in the report. So under construction properties have a lot of assumptions, right? The property may be constructed after a long time. The under construction property might go through a lot of construction cost, which is additional, which may not be, accurately computable, and so on. So under construction property, the qualifying clauses could include satisfactory completion, inspection by the RV following completion of construction, confirmation or variation of the original valuation figure. So the issue of all relevant approvals, including a satisfactory building completion certificate, reports from other experts. So many things that can play a role, and so many things that perhaps are outside the scope of work of a land and building valuer, which can be stated in the CLDs, and where the valuer can say this was not my job, or the valuer can say that this information was not available, and therefore I have taken such assumptions. Then some samples of CLD. Some of these might be repetitions. In that case, we will skip them. Some of these might be general. So for all asset classes, it can talk about that in course of valuation, we provided we provided with both verbal and written information, and that we have, however, evaluated the information provided to us by the company through broad inquiry, analysis, and review, but we have not carried a due diligence or audit of the information provided. So you can make this disclaimer. We are independent of the client. I think we'd already discussed that we can say that the fee that was paid for our services no way influenced the result of our analysis. Then we can say that our report is meant for the purpose mentioned above and should not be used for any purpose other than the purpose mentioned therein. The report should not be copied or reproduced without obtaining our prior written approval for any purpose other than the purpose for which it is prepared, right? Then we can say that no assumption for legal matters, including but not limited to legal or title concerns. Then they can say the assets and interests therein have been valued free and clear of any liens or encumbrances. Then we can talk about land and building. We can talk about the physical condition of improvements were based on visual inspection. We can say that no engineering tests were done at the site. We can say that where a sketch plan is attached to the report, it does not purport to represent accurate architectural plans. Then we can say that unless otherwise stated as part of terms of engagement, the RV has not made a specific compliance survey or analysis of the various permits and licenses under central, state, and local laws, regulations applicable to the operation and use of subject property, and this valuation does not consider the effect, if any, of non-compliance. Then the sale of the subject property is assumed to be on an all cash basis. Financial arrangements would affect the price at which the property may sell for if placed on the market. Value varies with the purpose and date. So this report is not to be referred if the purpose is different other than mentioned. Actual realizable value that is likely to be fetched upon sale of the property under consideration shall entirely depend on the demand and supply of the same in the market at the time of sale. So these are some other asset class wise, these are some other samples. Coming to plant and machinery. So the client owner and its management representative warranted to us that the information that they supplied was complete, accurate, true, and correct to the best of their knowledge. We have relied upon the representation of the owner, clients, the management, and other third parties concerning the financial data, operational data, maintenance schedules, maintenance schedules of all the plant, machinery, equipment, tools, vehicles, real estate investments, and other investments in tangible assets. So we have taken all that, and we are then saying that in no event shall we be liable for any loss, damage, cost, or expenses arising away from fraudulent acts, misrepresentations, or willful default. These are some examples for plant and machinery. Definition and premise of value. So you can say that it should be noted that liquidation value could be significantly different from the fair value or fair market value, and that fair liquidation value in an orderly sale can be very different from the liquidation value in a fire sale transaction, and liquidation value of a single machine can be very different from a group, and so on. So as such, the premise of liquidation value for the said purpose in this report is liquidation value of the assets on a standalone basis, or in some cases, group of assets in an orderly sale. So then we say that we have examined the assets described therein exclusively for the purpose of identification and description of the property, that the RV's observations and reporting of the subject improvements are for the valuation process and purposes only, and should not be considered as a warranty, right? So all these, I think we have also discussed previously. In the absence of statement to the contrary, we have assumed that no hazardous condition. This one we read thoroughly in the previous para, in the previous chapter, in the previous part. IV expressed no opinion as to how closely the actual results will correspond to those. This is also something that we read a while back. Then the sale of the subject asset is assumed to be on an all cash basis. So we are not saying that yes, there will be more people who are who might be willing to invest. We're talking saying that yes, it will be restricted to people who are wanting to purchase these assets in cash. Value is an estimated worth equivalent of an asset on a particular date based on certain facts and findings, and varies with its purpose. So we are saying that yes, we have computed the value based on the purpose and the demand and supply of the same at the time of sale. So yes, this is what we have tried to estimate. Coming to securities of financial assets. So while our work has involved analysis of financial information and accounting records, our engagement does not include an audit. So in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards of the client's existing business records. Accordingly, we assume no responsibility and make no representations with respect to the accuracy or completion of any information provided by or on behalf of you and the client. Our report is subject to the scope and limitations detailed hereinafter. As such, the report is to be read in totality and not in parts, in conjunction with the relevant documents referred to herein, and the context of purpose for which it is made. The evaluation of companies and businesses is not a precise science, and the conclusions arrived at in many cases will be subjective and dependent on the exercise of individual judgment. So this is therefore there is therefore no indisputable single value, and we normally express our opinion on the value as falling within a likely range. However, as purpose requires the expression of a single value, we have adopted a value at the midpoint of our valuation range. So this is basically again with respect to the idea that you are taking care of one single value without a range of value. The actual market price achieved may be higher or lower based on the circumstances of the transaction, the nature of the business, the knowledge, negotiating ability, and motivation of the buyers and sellers, and the applicability of a discount or premium for control. So we can say that our opinion is not the only factor that should be considered by the parties in agreeing the transaction price. Then we can say that an analysis of such nature is necessary based on the prevailing stock market, financial, economic, and other conditions in general, and industry trends in particular, as an effect on and the information made available to us as of the date hereof. So events occurring after the date. So this is again something that we assume that there is no obligation to update, revise, or reaffirm this report beyond the date of valuation. Then the ultimate analysis will have to be tempered by the exercise of judicious discretion by the RV and judgment, taking into account the relevant factors. There will always be several factors, example, management capability, present and prospective competition, yield on comparable securities, market sentiment, which may not be apparent from the face of the balance sheet. Then we talk about unavailability of information as on valuation date, that in case we don't have the balance sheet, we don't have other information, then we can say that all the report that we have made is based on other information, and therefore we need to look into that. So how can users reduce CLDs? So they can clarify scope of work and limit the CLDs beforehand. They can provide all possible information documents to the valuer wherever possible. They can provide detailed FAR inventory list for focus of valuer on verification, analysis, and not listing of assets. They can provide following facilities with coordination with the CD. They can talk about how personal presence or supervision of senior persons can help in the process, and they can allow facilities to test, weigh intangible assets where feasible. So with this, my presentation comes to rest. I can take some questions if any now. I think we have another 15 minutes for questions. Anyone who has any question? Anyone?
Mr. Paresh Agarwal has raised his hand.
Rishi, you can unmute yourself. I have already given the permission that you can unmute yourself. If you have any questions, you can ask. Any other issues in valuation, in making reports that you want to discuss? Any other concerns? Any other topic that you want me to talk about? We can do that. Of course, the topic that we were discussing today is CLDs. If there is no question on this topic, then we can talk about anything else that is on your mind with respect to valuation.
So there's a question in the Q&A box.
I will just open that. So I think this question is from Mr. Emmanuel. If financial institutions are using our valuation for other purposes, which wasn't issued for that purpose, how can we stop? So, sir, the idea is that whenever you're issuing a report and you limit your purpose within the report, and if somebody still ends up using your report for any other purpose, then they will themselves be responsible for it. Because in case they suffer any loss in future because of your valuation report, then they cannot come back to you and say, oh, you are now liable to indemnify us because we made this or gave this loan based on your report, and now see we have suffered a loss. So that's how you can kind of address that issue. So wherever your purpose is very particular, state that very, very particular purpose, that this is what I'm giving the valuation report for, and this is the limited purpose for which it should be used. Another question that has come in is, I hope that I was able to answer you. If not, if you have any follow-on question, you can unmute yourself and ask as well. Another question is how to take care in case of report being shared and the matters lands in court. So if the report has been shared and the matter lands in court, the idea is to prevent any liability today. So when you're doing the valuation today and when you're making the report today, you have to be careful. You have to talk about all these limitations, disclaimers in your valuation report. You have to make sure that you're doing the compliance with international valuation standards. You have to confirm that all the requirements of the IVS are followed. This will allow you to defend your report in case the report does or the matter does land up in court. And the idea is that your report should be so strong that the person who is reading your report should think or believe that there is no point taking this report to the court, because this report is complete in itself, and that it is strong enough that there is no challenge possible against that report. So I hope I was able to answer both the questions. If not, maybe you can follow up with your additional questions or speak out. Maybe we can have a conversation. I have another question. Now, Sony Ahuja ji is asking that with a new incorporated company, when the valuation is done, the authorities have questioned the projections and the valuation being high and have asked to revalue it at face value. So we have also witnessed this, sir. We also handle a couple of many scrutinies, wherein especially for startup entities, or startup entities in the sense that they are still investment entities, but they are beyond startup entities as defined under income tax. And we also come across such situations where the projections have been questioned, and that under section 56 7B, there has been incidences where value has been added to the assessment of the company. We have also come across situations where we have been able to address it in appeals. The objective there should be that the company's projections that are coming to you should be close to possible reality. Now, in some cases, what people do is, oh, we need to come out with this value. So they increase the sales, they increase the numbers in such a fashion that it becomes, when after 3 years or 4 years, when the assessment actually takes place, it is then seen, oh, the projections were very high as compared to what were used for the purpose of valuation report, or the projections were very high as compared to what is actually there in the past 3 years. Because what happens is, by the time your assessment comes into place, your 3 years are over, and then somebody can look back and say, oh, you plotted this as your projection, and what is your actual result? So when they compare the actual, and the actual is very far from the projected financials, they say, oh, this is all sham. So that is what has happened in few of the cases that we are handling. And the objective is to make sure that the revenue is closer to the reality. And if the revenue is closer, then you can also argue that, oh, the revenue was there, sir, but yes, the cost or the profit did not come. Or in other senses, what you do is you kind of show high growth at the end of the relevant period. Say, if you're plotting the projections for 5 years, you kind of say that, okay, high growth will happen only in the last 2 years, and you kind of talk about the first 2-3 years as the growth which will, or project the growth which will actually happen, and then look at the how the number is going up based on the actual valuation.
Yes. Sir, one more clarification.
Yes, sir.
We have given valuation, and the chartered accountant given projection report for the year 20 March. Accordingly, the CC limit have been sanctioned, but now the projection and reality is very less because of the pandemic. And the bank is asking them to reduce CC limit, but they are not able. But income approach valuation method also is less, and in the property also is less demand. So how to manage the situation? Party also suffering, bank also suffering.
Restructuring, sir, restructuring. COVID-related restructuring is the key. And I believe, yes, the COVID has created a problem for many businesses. And the government has come up as a solution. What they have come up as a solution is the proposal to restructure. So while the account is still regular in the records of bank, it should come, we should try and propose a restructuring with the bank, so that the immediate cash flows that are required are delayed. The company gets some moratorium, and the company is then able to repay these dues after 1 or 2 years rather than today itself.
Yes, sir. Some of them arranged some other place not to make a NPA, and many are suffering because the projection is became a decline, like not up to mark. So bank has a
present projections declining, and present actual numbers declining as compared to the projections is not something which is very difficult to address. It keeps happening. What needs to be taken care of is the ratios that are there, and the ratio should make sense for the bank to continue, because see, the bank may not give additional funds, but what the bank is normally interested in is keeping their NPAs low. And to
Yes,
do
sir.
that, they are normally also interested in ensuring that if there is any moratorium that is required to be issued, they're normally able to issue it. But yes, without adequate security, without the valuation of for the security, without the projections matching, maybe they will not be able to sanction additional facilities.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So I think we have answered the three questions. Any further questions from anyone?
Sir, I actually have a further question.
Yes, Soni. Yes.
Yeah. So, with regard to the authorities raising the query on the projections, so this is a situation wherein the registrar of companies has raised a query, not the income tax authorities.
Okay.
So, with the income tax authorities, we see that the query is raised after a couple of years of providing the report. But with the registrar of companies, the form got rejected on the basis that the valuation is too high.
Okay. So the form got rejected because the valuation is too high, because the projections are too high.
And it should be done at face value. They did have their revenue structure in place, wherein the target which was provided was quite achievable by the company.
So we have not seen this kind of thing happening so far coming in from the ROC. So which ROC is this, ma'am?
I'm just thinking if it would be fine to say it out here.
No, not a problem. So we can always discuss offline. But the point is that, yes, it needs a more thorough discussion. And this seems to be a problem which is anyways off the topic that we're discussing today here. It is not a matter of CLD. It is more of a matter of, acceptance of the valuation report by an authority. So we can always discuss this offline. I think my number was available. In case not, I can post it on the chat box.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Any difficulties that you have faced in the past to use this CLD, or if you have read through this guideline, any point that I discussed today that you need a clarification from me, you want me to explain again? So I believe, Mehak, over to you. I think we don't have any further questions. And what I can do is I can try and ask a few questions. So question to plant and machinery valuers: how will you do a valuation without an FAR? What caveat will you put in case you don't have the FAR? Do we have any plant and machinery valuers with us today? Anyone would like to participate and tell me? So we'll normally try and in this case, you will normally try and make sure that FAR is fixed asset register. FAR is fixed assets register. So basically, if the FAR is not available to you, you will most probably look at the physical condition of the plant and machinery, and then of course give a big CLD that you identified this machinery without any FAR, and you then estimated the date of purchase, you estimated the age of the machinery, you estimated the capacity of the machinery, you estimated the usability of the machine. So you will have a big assumption chart there, and your assumptions that you will be taking care of. And I believe then we can talk about land and building valuation. In case we don't have too many participants from plant and machinery, we can talk about land and building. Any land and building values on the house? Can we say that yes, when we do a valuation for a land and building, we have to talk about the assumption on what is the use of the plant and machinery. Does everyone agree that the use of the land and building is important for the purpose of valuation? So in that case, you might like to clarify in your report that yes, you are using highest and best use, or you are using existing use, or you are using using such other such other information that is with you. For SFA assets, of course, the projections, it is very clear in IVS also that you can't take projections for granted. So there used to be a time when, I have come across some valuation reports where what has happened is that somebody has just put the projection and said, oh, these are provided by the management. I have just run through these in my model. I don't have any responsibility on these projections. So that is no longer acceptable. You have to be clear and you have to be very, very sure that the valuation that you're doing, the projections that you're plotting are based on the actual numbers, that they are based on the projections are making sense. They are based on assumptions, sound assumptions, that kind of growth is possible in the industry, possible in the company. So you have to talk of all that, and you have to say that yes, you did some analysis, something about those projections. That is, I think, what I can complete now. I think Mehak, you can wind up and take this forward.
Sure. So first of all, very, very, very thanks to you for today's session. I hope all the questions were answered by the candidates. And I'm very thankful to the candidates also who joined today. So a big thanks to both the speaker and the candidates for today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Please
Mehak.
send the PP copies.
Yes, sir. You'll be receiving the link as well as the certificates plus the PPT that sir prepared.
Okay, madam. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful participation. Looking forward to more such interactions in future. Thank you.
Good sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.